So there are two different ways you need to be able to think about the modes in order to really get a good grasp of what you can do with them. I call these two ways of thinking derivative thinking and parallel thinking. And I'm going to cover derivative thinking first. In fact, what we were doing in the previous lesson is a perfect example of derivative thinking. I was using the notes of a C major scale, but I played them over a D note in the bass to create the D Dorian mode. The D Dorian mode is derived from the C major scale because it uses the notes of the C major scale. You would also say the same about the C Ionian mode, the E Phrygian mode, the F Lydian mode, G Mixolydian, A Aeolian, and B Locrian. All of those are derived from the C major scale. All of those have the exact same 7 notes in them. Another word for modes or scales that contain the exact same notes would be enharmonic. They're enharmonic modes. So let's try out a couple examples. I'm going to start up a loop on my computer that is just a groove played over a G7 chord. And I happen to know that the G Mixolydian mode is going to work beautifully over that G7 chord. I will be getting into more detail later on about how I know that, how I determine what mode goes with what chord. For now, just trust me on that and just listen to what it sounds like. So here's my G7. And here's my G Mixolydian mode. So G Mixolydian was derived from the C major scale, and I know that there are 6 other modes that are also derived from the C major scale, or in other words, they're enharmonic with the G Mixolydian mode. Those would be A Aeolian, the B Locrian mode, the C Ionian mode, or the D Dorian mode, or the E Phrygian mode, or the F Lydian mode, So you might have noticed as I cycled through all those different modes that the overall sound of what I was doing didn't really change a whole lot. And that's because the whole time I was playing over that G7 chord, and I was using modes that are enharmonic, or that contain the exact same 7 notes. And really, as long as I'm playing over that G7 chord, the mode that I'm in is G Mixolydian. Really all I'm doing is thinking in all those other modes, A Aeolian, B Locrian, etc., all of those modes that are derived from C major. I'm thinking in those modes, but technically because I'm over that G7 chord, I'm really in G Mixolydian the whole time. And another thing, if you were paying attention, that you might have noticed is that in the process of doing that, I covered the whole neck of the guitar. And that's one of the really cool things about the modes that we'll be getting into later on. Okay, let's do one more example. This time I'm going to use the Frank Zappa song Black Napkins. It's a famous guitar solo of Zappa's. The solo happens over a progression that just goes back and forth from a C sharp minor 7 to a D major 7. Those two chords together tell me that I want to play in the C sharp Phrygian mode. And again, how I know that is something I'll be covering later in this mini clinic. For now, just trust me on that, listen to what it sounds like, and try and get the general idea of what I'm doing. So here's the progression. That's the C sharp minor 7 chord. And that's the D major 7 chord. And here's C sharp Phrygian played over that. Now, I know that the C sharp Phrygian mode is a mode that's derived from the A major scale. And I also know that there's 6 other modes that are also derived from the A major scale and that are going to be enharmonic with C sharp Phrygian. So those modes would be A Ionian, B Dorian, D Lydian, E Mixolydian, F sharp Aeolian, G sharp Locrian. Those are all going to be enharmonic with C sharp Phrygian and therefore sort of interchangeable. So I'm going to run through all of those. Remember that the progression that I'm playing over is what really determines the mode that I'm in. I'm in C sharp Phrygian. I'm just thinking in all of these other modes. So here's what that sounds like. Here's A Ionian. Here's B Dorian. Here's D Lydian. Here's E Mixolydian. Here's F sharp Aeolian. Here's G sharp Locrian. So again, I'm just thinking in all of those other modes. I'm really in C sharp Phrygian that whole time, but all of those other modes are enharmonic with C sharp Phrygian, and I'm thinking in those modes. And what that does is it gets me around to different spots on the neck of the guitar and gets me into some different finger patterns so I can maybe break out of the same old rut and come up with some interesting ideas. Lastly, I'll just give you a quick reminder that over any chord progression, you are by no means limited to a single mode or just the notes in that mode. Lots of notes can work if you handle them the right way, and your options, as always, are wide open.